Good day, everyone. My name is John Michael A. Istaka, and welcome to my blog. Today, we are talking about the evolution of transportation in the Philippines. This is our topic today. So, we all know that transportation are very helpful to a human, but in the past, before the transportation was made, all humans traveled using their foot, and they traveled one place to another using only their foot. Can you imagine you can walk 20,000 miles using only your foot and direct sunlight? We are very thankful to the inventors that makes many mode of transportation, air, land, and water transportation, so that we can travel or we can go to our places that we love faster and less hassle. So let's start. Based on my research, the first transportation used in the Philippines was the Chilean Carabao transportation. The Carabao have many benefits. The carabao holds a special place in the lives of rural family, communities, and even considered as the national animal of the Philippines. Carabao can pull a caratela with six or more people, which can make it convenient as a form of transportation. The carabao can be one of the mode of transportation. The carabao can be source of fresh milk, and also the carabao can help to the farmers in doing their agricultural system. So carabao is came from the Spanish word, and when we say in the Philippines, calabao. Calabao is a Tagalog word for carabao, and carabao was introduced by Guam to the Philippines during the Spanish colonial period on 16th century up to 18th century. So the carabao is first kind of transportation in the Philippines during 16th century. After to the carabao transportation, the transportation in the Philippines was evolved to kalesa. Chajan. Calesa was introduced to the Philippines on the 18th century by the Spanish. And the Calesa in 18th century was the private and public mode of transportation in that time. Calesa is a horse-drawn carriage. It was called in different names, Karamata or Caritila, in the Philippines. It is a two-wheeled horse-drawn carriage used in the Philippines. Calesa is the oldest mode of transportation that still exists today. It was introduced to the islands of the Philippines in 18th century. Presently, Calesa are used in some streets, especially in the tourist area of old cities and some rural areas. From Calesa, the land transportation was evolved into the bicycle. Then, in 1902, the Philippines uses the bicycles in the street of Manila. According to some research around the world, using bicycle or regular cycling is can help increase cardiovascular fitness, increase muscle strength and flexibility, improve joint mobility, decrease stress levels, improve posture and coordination, strengthen the bones, and many other benefits. And that's how bicycles are very useful to humans. 18th century, the Philippines introduced the train. On November 24, 1892, the train was began their operations in Manila during the Spanish colonial period. From that time, the first rail tracks were laid in Manila Dagupan Ferrocarril Line in 1891, and the colonial train had its first commercial run. Until today, when the main line south is being rehabilitated under much public anticipation. Philippine trains have been running for 120 years. After the bicycles in 1902, the Philippines was introduced the jeepneys in 19
1930s. The jeepneys came in the Philippines was made in the America. And this is the cheap utility vehicle in that time. Jeepneys are most popular mode of transportation in the Philippines.
Jeepney was originally called as GP or General Purpose Car. The vehicle was used by the Americans during World War II. When the US troops left the Philippines after World War II, jeeps were left behind, and since the Filipinos used it as a mode of transportation.
Airplane was introduced in the Philippines on 1941. And on March 15, 1941,
The first airplane came and took first flight in the Philippines with a single B-craft model 18 NPC-54 on daily services between Manila and Baguio. It was operated by two pilots and had the passenger of 5 persons. On November 14, 1946, the Philippine Airlines have a route in the America, while America Airlines were allowed in the exchange of air services.
on 1946, the bus was introduced in the Philippines. Bus.
A bus company named Philippine Rabbit was subsequently launched in the first run traveling from the municipality of Moncada in the Central Luzon province. Ricardo de Lara Paras and his brother-in-law Florencio P. Buan established a pioneering bus service in the post-World War II in the Philippines.
In 1970s, the boats was introduced in the Philippines. The next transportation is the boats. In the Filipino word, it was called bangka.
Bangka is a native kind of water transportation in the Philippines. Since the introduction of the motor engine was on 1970s, boats in the Philippines started their transportation on 1970s until in the present days. This picture is a miniature of the Butuan boats, and Butuan boats are the oldest archaeological example of watercraft in the Philippines.
In 20th century, the mode of transportation is a motorcycle. A motorcycle was entered in the Philippines on 20th century. These motorcycles are made from America.
Motorcycles are made from the safety bicycle, a bicycle with an engine and have front and rear wheels of the same size and a pedal crank to drive the rear wheel.
Also in the 20th century, because of the motorcycle invented in the Philippines and entered in the 20th century, the people are invented the tricycle. This was also on the 20th century made. The tricycle was also a common and unique mode of transportation in the Philippines.
Tricycle is a motorized and also it is an indigenous form of the auto rickshaw. It is another popular means of transport in the Philippines. Tricycles are used as a public utility vehicles either playing a set of road or for hire. It resembles the auto rickshaw of India and the tuk-tuk of Thailand and other Asia countries. It is different from the rickshaw because the cab is attached to the right side of the motorcycle instead of being in front or at the back.
Also in the 20th century, the Filipinos or the Philippine invented the transportation of the mode of transportation habal-habal.
Habal-habal is a kind of transportation here in the Philippines that means sitting close to each other. The passengers who usually range from 4 to 5 persons that sit behind the driver close to each other. It is known as the motorcycle taxi in other parts of the world. The habal-habal has extended seats of often sideways but a T-shaped crossbeam. It is a common mode of transportation in the mountainous or remote areas of the Philippines.
The bicycle transportation on 19th century was evolved on 20th century and they make this a pedicab. Pedicab was a bicycle with a sidecar.
Pedicab or padjak in Bisaya word tricycad or sikad. It is a manually powered form of transportation in the Philippines. Instead of motorcycle, pedicab uses a bicycle with a passenger's cab attached to the side. It is known as a cycle rickshaw in other countries, designed to carry passengers on the higher basis. In our country, they are mainly used to ferry passengers along smaller residential streets or often to from jeepney or other public utility vehicles.
There are many transportation now in the Philippines. Evolution of the transportation in our time are very faster. Just like now we have a taxi, aircon taxi, and automatic car for transportation. We have the aircon bus. We have the eco-friendly train. And that's why we are very thankful to the inventors that made those kinds of transportations.
Because transportation are very helpful from the past until in the present days. It makes the life of people easier, just like in going to other places, they can go faster in the places that they want to visit. It provides access to natural resources and promotes trade. And transportation also systems and routes greatly influence how and where people live. Transportation also allows people to expand throughout a country territory and to live comfortably in remote areas far from factories and farms.
And that's all for our blog today. And I hope you learned something. And thank you.